what they're going through in Ferguson, Baltimore, Cleveland. We went through this 14 years ago. I grew up in the Warren, Ohio, where policemen could do whatever they wanted to do to you, and there was nothing. You had no recourse. There was nobody to go to.
Hello, my name is Tim Tolka. I'm the author of Blue Mafia. I got interested in this story because I realized that people in Warren and Steubenville don't really know much about their DOJ investigations, especially in Steubenville, where the media begrudgingly covered the problems that led to the investigation. In Warren, there was a lot more active, aggressive journalism that explained why the Department of Justice came to Warren and how the investigation proceeded. But even still, there's not a complete record that condenses the whole story. And so I wanted to create one. And I think that you guys will really enjoy Blue Mafia. There's going to be a lot of people that are very angry about what I've written. And if that's the case, I encourage you to sue me.
What, KB? What? Give me your cell phone. My cell phone is off. Taylor, where's your cell phone? Oh, he did. He should be watching. No, I got this. Oh man, let this be the right one. What they doing? Stay on the ground. Stay on the ground. Come on, damn it. Why is he trying to make you on the ground? What do you mean to them? Why is y'all doing that on the ground? I said, give him. Oh, motherfucker. Why are you taking him in private?
Here in the city of Warren, the biggest problem we had was the situation with the strip searches. I'm sure you read about that. We had been strip searching for years. Nobody said anything because who was you going to report it to? The chief of police? Law director? If you are a policeman, you're a hero. Don't question it. We're the police, and you guys are the politicians. You leave us alone. We do what we want to do. We're not accountable to anybody.
Finally, other officers arrive at the scene and COPWATCH removes the woman from his car.
What do you mean? You're going to rock to that car, you're getting tasered again. Rock to that car.
But as she is walking out of the frame, she is tasered again. The horrified expressions of onlookers can be seen on the tape. COPWATCH in his report claims the woman fell after being tasered again, this time falling to the ground and being knocked.
The only way you can fire the police chief is if you go to the civil service board. And even if they say, yes, we're going to terminate him, the chief of police and the fire chief still have a right through the courts to get the job back. It's almost impossible to fire.
I was around when the Justice Department was called the first time, and I am really trying to get in touch with someone to convey to them that I don't want them to leave Warren without talking to the people who called them in the first place. Let the citizens who called them determine whether there's been real change.
The following post was shared with the COPBLOCK network by Tim Toka, via the COPBLOCK.org submissions page. Within the post, Tim discusses Blue Mafia, a book he wrote detailing police corruption and violence in Ohio, specifically concerning the police departments in Steubenville and Warren. Also included is a video preview of that book by Tim. Tim also states, "The book is forthcoming and mentions all the officers involved by name with extensive documentation from the media, court documents, former and current officials and witnesses." Blue Mafia, an exploration of consent decrees in Ohio. A new book entitled Blue Mafia examines the nation's second-ever and fourth-oldest Department of Justice (DOJ) investigations of patterns and practices of police misconduct in two small Ohio towns seated in Rust Belt Democratic counties. Ohio has hosted as many federal police misconduct investigations as New York State, although it has only a fraction of its population. Only California has hosted more investigations than Ohio, although it has more than twice Ohio's population. However, nowhere has the DOJ been resisted more fiercely than in Ohio. In 1995, civil rights lawyer Richard Olivito began to feel hunted while litigating a civil rights case against the Steubenville police. He and his family received death threats. He and his wife survived 2 failed assassination attempts before placing a desperate call to the DOJ and driving to D.C. to meet with federal attorneys. The DOJ later sent 2 attorneys to investigate and requested a truckload of documents from the city of Steubenville. In 1997, the DOJ sued Steubenville for a pattern of civil rights violations and the city signed the second consent decree in U.S. history. Click on the banner above to find out more about all of the ways you can assist us in the fight against the police state. Click on the banner above to find out more about all of the ways you can assist us in the fight against the police state. The pattern of misconduct that caused Steubenville to become one of the less than 3% of municipalities saddled with a consent decree was essentially similar to that of the LAPD Rampart scandal. There were 1 or 2 allegations the DOJ was aware of against the police in Steubenville that not even the LAPD could touch. Steubenville has a history of corruption and organized crime which persists until the present day. The federal auditor for the consent decree eventually admitted that he couldn't change the town's culture or the choices of its powerful families. Before the DOJ came to town, there were brutal and unaccountable police on the payroll of the mob in Steubenville. In 1986, the chief was accused of beating a white British woman who was with a black man in a Bob Evans, while yelling "nigger lover." Once, an officer beat a woman with a chair inside a local courthouse, yet the chief famously refused to discipline his officers. Meanwhile, the county prosecutor was recruiting hitmen into an undercover narcotics task force and plotting to set people up, rob them and even murder them. Richard Olivito handled 2 criminal cases in which it was revealed in open court that an officer planted evidence and trafficked drugs. All these circumstances on top of 44 court settlements and civil rights cases piqued the interest of the DOJ Civil Rights Division. 6 years after being involved in the DOJ investigation of Steubenville, Olivito again faced DOJ attorneys on the other side of a conference room in 2003. One of them asked, "Is it as bad as Steubenville?" Olivito replied, "I think it's worse. It's laced with racism." Olivito visited the DOJ after he learned of strip searches, beatings and multiple alleged murders by the Warren police. Warren was Ferguson 10 years before the death of Michael Brown and had similar problems as recently reported by the DOJ in the Baltimore Police Department. In 2003, a video of 3 cops beating an African American was broadcast by national outlets. Strip searches were routine after traffic stops, if cops discovered the driver has a suspended license or acted in a way they didn't like. A spree of volatile new lawsuits on top of more than 50 during the preceding decades as well as desperate calls from community leaders convinced the Bush DOJ to investigate in 2005. But the DOJ didn't file a suit accusing Warren of a pattern and practice of civil rights violations until 2012. Still today, No Warren officer has ever been fired for excessive force and no officer has ever been punished in a lethal force incident. The 9-year tenure of the department's former chief, John Mandopoulos, caused DOJ intervention after 2 years and a pattern of federal involvement which intensified after every presidential election. The WPD now hosts the 4th oldest DOJ investigation in the country, as they strive every day to reach compliance with the decree, which must be maintained for 2 years in order for the consent decree to be lifted. Blue Mafia portrays the challenge of civil rights on the front line against police brutality in the courts and the streets of America. No other book examines the federal process of police reform in comparable depth, revealing the influence of local and national politics as well as insurers, law firms and police unions. Often, the DOJ is the last line of defense for small-town residents, but it offers no remedy to those deprived and violated, only the promise of a less brutal future. For residents in Cleveland, Baltimore, Chicago and other cities with ongoing DOJ settlement agreements, there is much to learn from the experiences of Warren and Steubenville. Tim Toka,